Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 70 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdown show. All the lads are back together, and we've got a bit of a different episode this week as we cover some more meta topics around the game. Before we get into all that, what have you guys been up to for the past week? Court?
Actually a fair amount of work in Destiny. Doing a little bit of the exotic mission, which we'll talk about later in the episodes. Some Cali farming, because that was the featured raid. And plenty of DMZ with yourself and one of the patrons, Nodi. And to be honest, I've spotted a lot of folks jumping on the DMZ train, and I do love seeing it. I think last night, before I signed off, I saw a Resolute who's done many great work and contributions towards DMB with a bunch of art and all that great stuff. He was talking about it, and just lots of people talking about it, and I'm all for it. I'm all here for it, and let us know how you're doing and what weapons you've been using, all that jazz. Impetus, what have you been up to?
Yeah, hello, good to be back, guys. Sorry that I missed out on episode 69. I'm real bummed, but you guys did a great job talking about some amazing weapons. But this week we did a dash of Cali farming. I'm missing one red border for Age-Old Bond, so it is what it is. My luck just wasn't there this week, but that's all right. I've got everything else unlocked and crafted. Did the exotic mission, which we'll be talking about very shortly, which of course required a good amount of fishing. So I've been doing lots and lots of fishing, been getting some pretty sweet exotic drops when I go to turn in my exotic fish that you need. So I did get my first ever 70 stat exotic armor with Stompies, hilariously. It's a really good roll. I got 28 mobility. That's unmasterworked. So I'll absolutely be masterworking. I don't know if I'll be using it a whole lot given its current state, but really, really love the juiced stats that exotics have been getting this past season. It has made so many random drops so much more valuable just because they have a high base, and I don't have that on so many of my other exotics. So yeah, that's what I have been up to this past week. How about yourself, Saint?
Yeah, a lot of DMZ. Kind of took a few seasons off of that and came back, which has been great. Enjoying all the updates, catching up on all the new things there, playing with a bunch of the patrons, and Lego even was, dipping some toes into the waters, trying to get ready for upcoming marathon. Rounding out all the Last Wish red borders. I think I still need 2 or 3. I want to say I need 2 more Tyranny of Heaven copies. And 1 more for Nation of Beasts, but we're getting real close to finishing out all those weapons. Definitely be doing that this week. And then, the exotic mission. We had a pretty easy time. Now, I say that, I know, obviously we're coming in there as our resident kind of fire team here, but I did enjoy it. Very cool mission, and a pretty cool weapon, literally. Figuratively too, but also literally, it's chill. Court, who do we have to thank before we jump into our meat of the episode here?
Yeah, well, Seb, we might need to put a little pencil in for another Last Wish farm between now when we record this and Tuesday when this episode comes out. So we're all still missing a few red borders. So should get that going. Yes, we've got obviously our normal array of sponsors to thank. We don't have any new patrons this week, but so shout out to these amazing people. We have a Modern Viking, Ascane Monk, Bryceroni, Deacon, IMK Rose, Moonlight, Shazo, and This Moment. Thank you very much, everyone. Just a reminder, you can send us all kinds of feedback directly to any of our socials via the DMB Discord server. Positive, critical, and constructive feedback helps with the trajectory of the podcast. and how we present and break down builds, activities, and much more in the PvE sandbox for all kinds of Destiny players. We'll be doing a fair amount of that this episode. We also want to extend a special thanks and appreciation to everyone that supports PvE, whether that is downloading and listening to our show, discussing it in the server, or supporting us via Patreon. And speaking of Patreon, if you'd like to support the show, please visit DestinyMassiveBreakdowns.com and click on the link to Patreon. You'll get access to members-only channels in Discord, behind-the-scenes information, input on the future of the show, plus access to our legendary annual merch drop. All right, Impetus, what are we talking about this week?
Yes, so we do have a little bit of TWAB-related news here. That's the mid-season weapons update. Some of the PvE highlights, of course, as always. So we'll be discussing those. There's some very fun pieces of information in there. And then, of course, the exotic quest and the weapon drops from that. I don't even think the quest has really a name necessarily, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, we'll be talking about that, giving you some tips and guides on what to expect in the quest. And then also we'll be touching on some first impressions with the weapon that drops. And then we're going to be doing, I guess, probably the best way to describe this would be a vibe check on the PvE meta in Destiny 2 right now. Taking a look at weapons. Again, mostly here are our exotics and our legendaries. Just kind of asking ourselves, hey, what do we like so far? What do we not like right now? What's good? What's not good? What's hot? What's cold? And what we hope to see, come in the future. Some wishful thinking, if you will. So that's what we've got on deck here. Before we get into the weapons update, I do want to do some housekeeping here. A little bittersweet housekeeping. So if you are not aware, or you may probably be aware already, Destiny Massive Breakdowns, the PvP show, is coming to a conclusion. You can hear Lego LaFlash and our very own St. Kabir discuss this a little bit more on their episode 301. That is not the final episode. You have not missed it if you're listening concurrently right now. There will be one more final DMB episode coming soon. We don't have the exact date at this time. Podcast versus Enemies, our show, and Beneath Twin Suns, the Star Wars show, are not going away. We are full steam ahead over here on PvE, so as long as folks keep listening and we're invested in Destiny, the show's going on, PvE will become the main podcast of the DMB network, and so patron support will still go directly to our show and then the wider DMB network. And speaking of the network as a brand, it's not going anywhere. Either the Discord server, our website, all of our social media channels are all sticking around, so you don't have to worry about any of those kinds of changes. If you're subscribed to all of us, that's still going to be fine. You'll still get all the updates that you have had for the past. And I think it's probably appropriate to say a huge thank you to DMB. Without that first show, the original show, which did start out as PvE and PvP and then gradually morphed into PvP, obviously our show and then also Beneath Twin Suns would not be possible. So we're all incredibly grateful. I know so many of you listeners are also incredibly grateful for the work that DMB has done for the wider Destiny community, but that show is coming to a close. On a little bit of a lighter note, Saint, I believe you have a personal update that you need to make.
Yeah, DMB coming to a close. Very sad. Definitely kind of, I think, drew us a lot into like the science community in general. And it is good to see that will continue, right? All that good Destiny science stuff will continue. But presently, in the previous episode, I pronounced or mispronounced the name of the Last Wish fusion rifle. So I'm going to give myself a bit of a correction here. I said Teshuan Force, and it is actually Techian Force. I think that my mind was just on like Chinese food, and so that's like kind of where I went. But I nevertheless did definitely get that one right. And it's definitely Techian, as in tech witches, right? Like the dreaming city. This has spawned some, kind of jokes. My friends have hit me with the Tekwon sauce is an ongoing one now. And I'm okay with that. I'm happy to take that from it, but also admit when I totally butcher a weapon's name, because it's going to happen every now and then. And I got no fewer than like 4 people telling me that I totally dropped that one. So feel free to write in anytime. We are totally butchering something in the sandbox.
So your little engagement farm worked.
Yeah. And now I'm thinking,
Saint's got the 4D chess plays in action here.
It's actually all strategic. Yeah. We're boosting those views. You know what else is getting boosted?
Oh no.
Graviton Lance.
That is such a massive segue there. That is, you could see that segue from space. Yes, we do have some quick weapon update highlights here, and the major one here I was not expecting. When I read this article, I was like, this must be a mistake because it's already good. Yes, Graviton Lance, during the mid-season update for Season 21, the PvE damage goes up by 67%. That's 6-7. There's no decimal point in the middle of that. It is a whole number, 6-7. Like, that's crazy. Also talked about some of the PvP changes to cosmology, which is the intrinsic trait for Graviton Lance, where the explosions go off. That doesn't affect PvE, so we'll still get all that crazy kind of void action, especially if you're using like volatile rounds as well. Lots of explosions going off, but that's crazy. Like 67%. It's a really solid weapon just now. It's got like all the perks attached to its catalyst. You've got Vorpal Weapon, and you've also got Turnabout as well, plus the plus 20 range. But I know they said that they're going to remove the sort of quote hidden hand kind of secret ability of aim assistance. But again, doesn't really affect PvE sandbox as much. But yeah, did you guys really expect a big buff to Graviton Lance?
No, no, not at all. Yeah, that's we're gonna obviously be talking about this a lot later on, but bear in mind it already does an extra 40% damage to minor enemies because of its being an exotic primary and that buff that happened to all exotic primaries. So to have this now, this will stack on top of that. So this is going to be, and this apparently will apply to all enemy types, not just minors. So. Yeah, this thing's gonna be shredding, man. Like, that is incredible.
I originally read this and my mind went to, Revision Zero got some obscene buffs like this, which is what took my mind back to, okay, well, what is like Revision Zero doing damage wise versus Graviton Lance? And my thought was, oh, maybe they're trying to bring that kind of parity, right, between Revision Zero and Graviton Lance, because they already changed the way that Graviton was firing this season, right? And I think that's partially what bubbled it up so much in the Crucible. But all that to say, I went back and I checked kind of on what the Graviton Lance damage output is versus, your typical like minor enemy. And then I went back and looked at Revision Zero for the heavy burst, because that was the version of Revision Zero that got those obscene buffs also recently. And this will actually, based on just kind of estimate 67%, 1.67, like multiply it out there, this is going to put Graviton past Revision Zero. Now, obviously, Revision Zero has intrinsic anti-barrier, and it also has that powered up shot, the trance. So there is a little bit of a give and take there, but I think that with the cosmology explosions already working the way that they are with Graviton, and now that the base damage of these shots is going to be even just a little bit past where Revision Zero is at right now, which is a stellar weapon. We'll get into the kind of meta discussion later, but yeah, I'm very excited to be using this thing. And Cord, I know there's isn't there some kind of chess piece or something that you like to use or something like that, right? I think to remember
the one
like
folks have problems pronouncing. Falcon's Hauberk, yes. Yeah, strangely, I've not been using that as much this season because it's primarily been an arc season, and I've been creating about 1,000 orbs every GM, so I've been focusing on those type of builds. But yes, Falcon pair with Graviton Lance is going to be such a tearaway, because it's really easy as a hunter to get volatile rounds. You just just go invis, which is the whole core core fantasy of Void Hunter and come out of Invis and you've got volatile rounds and watch explosions just be spread everywhere. And with Graviton Lance getting that 67% damage buff to all enemies, but specifically miners on top of the 40% bonus from last year, it's doing some crazy damage here. Like I don't know what I'm going to pick between Graviton or the raid pulse rifle that completely escapes me. Collective obligation, yes, thank you.
Oh yeah.
Collective's got that great synergy with the whole get all your suppression, your weaken, and your volatile verbs loaded into the gun and then activate it, and it has its own like damage buff on top of the 40% damage buff to miners as well. So it's just going to be really tough. Really excited to see how Graviton is going to perform next season, because right now it performs really well, and like it doesn't have specific Void Overshield synergy. It's got Turnabout, which is just a basic Overshield compared to Void Overshield, but it's gonna be tough. Depends on the type of GM or type of content.
Isn't what is collective action adaptive RPM?
It's 390.
Can't remember.
So that yeah.
I think that's around an adaptive, or what an adaptive like would be, right?
Yeah, adaptive frames 390. Yep. So pretty standard. Whereas Graviton's got its own kind of gimmick. Plus, with this season they sped up the delay between the first and the second shot, and they kind of normalized the shots as well. So the second shot wasn't doing this extraordinary amount of damage. They've kind of normalized it downwards, but still a net gain on top of then the mid-season buff that's getting later on. So it's just been getting much like what Leviathan's Bread got. I know that's an unfair comparison with it being a heavy weapon, but it's been steadily going up the chain, and I'm all for it. And it's all these void weapons. Because Collective Obligation got a little kind of mini overhaul many seasons ago. A lot of these weapons are void.
Yeah.
Wave
I think
Splitter,
that Revision,
Ruinous, as trace rifles.
Revision's stats are just so obscene because of the way that you could do its like upgrade, V1, V2, V3, V4, all that stuff. I want to say a lot of Revisions, it's like pretty easy to get Revision 0 up to 100 range, like no problem, and that's hitting like 40 meters, which
that's what my revision has. Yeah, because I have mine crafted for PvP. I'm sitting at 100 range, 65 stability, 65 handling. But I mean, Graviton's stat package is even crazier. You're at 90 range and then 100 stability. The 90 range is impacted by the catalyst, but the 100 stability is right out the gate, man. Like that is crazy.
Yeah, that is kind of crazy. Stable. I don't know. It's good to see some competition, though. I like the balance of, Graviton's got the Void thing, but, Revision's a kinetic, so it's getting that little bit of extra unshielded damage, and I'm liking where that's headed,
I'm thinking, really, really quick with, like, the comparison between Graviton and Collective. For Graviton, I'm thinking more ad-dense activities, so Devil's Lair, which is this week's GM, before it changes over to the Corrupted when this episode comes out. I'm thinking in that the middle room halfway through the strike, before the Briggs, but we have to wait for Ghost to clear out the security lasers. That gets really dense with ads, and that's where I'm thinking Graviton Lance probably shine there, because you're spreading Cosmology. Cosmology does do its own chain reaction. If you kill something with Cosmology, it spawns another Cosmology orb, and it just keeps cascading like that. Whereas Collective Obligations maybe more for your Disgraced or your kind of Lightblade. There's not a lot of ads kind of in one area. It's more spread out. You've got more opportunity to spread your suppression, your weaken, and your volatility through collectives. But also, I'm speaking from the perspective of a hunter who has access to really easy kind of verbs that way. But exciting stuff. Looking forward to it. We do have some upcoming changes for Season 22. They've talked about a bunch of the zoom and rangefinder changes. Obviously, that will affect PvE, maybe not to the same extent as PvP. We have the hand cannon changes we've previously discussed in previous episodes. We've got the sword guard rework. We also have tuning to a handful exotics. They mentioned explicitly Le Monarch and, quote, big buffs, end quote, to Touch of Malice. Looking forward to that. And we also have changes to weapon types weapon perks like Bipod, Envious Assassin, and Under Over. Wasn't really expecting a buff to Envious Assassin. I think it's in a fair enough good shape right now, but I'll take it.
No. We need 5 rockets in the chamber. All right, Cord, getting 4 rockets off in a row. Not enough. We're going to need at least one more rocket in there.
Oh,
and I
no.
think
I'll take it.
Under Over, man, what can they do? So Under Over is kind of a trait that we have long lamented as just generally not worth it, even though it sounds good. What do you guys think? What is it going to take to push Under Over kind of into the viable territory, into a territory where you want to pick that perk on a weapon?
I mean, I said it when the perk first came out. Stop putting it in column 4, move it over to column 3. Like,
That would
it can be a really good utility perk, but I think people are too hardwired to having their damage perk be in column 4. Because there's the amount of weapons that have a damage perk in column 3 that have Under Over. I don't even know if they exist if they do, but yeah, I think a lot of people, especially for legendary primary weapons, you need a more consistent damage perk than Under Over, or stronger, whatever word you want to use for it. But yeah, I gotta look at see which weapons even have it in column 3, because I know it's Exalted Truth was the first one that ever had it. It was the only one that had it with in column 3. I think we had some this season that maybe have it, or last season.
We've got Exalted Truth. We've got Randy's throwing knife. Messenger. Phylotactic spiral. And yeah, that's it. Not a lot of choice for column 3. Whereas column 4, it's pretty much, all other weapons, and there's quite a lot. We're thinking like Tripwire Canary, Inquisitor, Coronac, which is the auto rifle, the Suros auto rifle, Nameless Midnight, Yesteryear. So yeah, quite a lot of weapons. Out of Bounds, Stay Frosty. Yeah. I'm with you. We're with it coming in 4th slot. Just no interest, because it's taking up a slot where I'd rather have something like Kinetic Trevors or an actual damage perk. It almost feels like an origin trait has entered the wrong door and has dropped itself into the 4th column. Because it does give me those.
Oh man!
It does give me those vibes of it being an origin trait. And I'm not compared to the other origin traits, I think it would be fine. It would be a great one to take in. There are some kind of quite weaker origin traits, but there's some really powerful ones out there as well.
That's the worst thing you could say about
talking about it. Yeah, sorry, but you're more of a half a trait kind of a guy. We don't really know how to break this to you.
We did cover this before a few episodes ago. We the science folks over on the server did discover that it's so it passively increases damage dealt to overshields and combatant shields, 10% damage against those plus barrier champion shields. And it's actually 34% damage against combatant overshields, which is multiplicative with the 10% damage increase. And then it's got 20% against guardian overshields as well. So when we talked about combatant overshields, we're talking about the moths when they cast their overshield.
Yep.
That's a type of combatant overshield. Also the darkness overshield from this from Lightfall.
The Shadow Legion backpack thing. Yeah.
So think of those, and that's your 34% damage increase, which is nothing to scoff at. But again, it's so situational that I'm just like, nah, I'm good. If it's in column 3, I think, big thumbs up. But
yeah, if they bump that, let's say they take that 20% versus elemental and barrier shields to 20%. Okay, now I see a scenario in which we were just joking about this before the show, but we were talking about hoping that we see an anti-barrier hand cannon coming in with these hand cannon buffs that we just mentioned. Um, let's say it's next season. We get anti-barrier hand cannon comes back for the first time, and then we get a little buff to under over in the third column on one of those guys, that exalted truth. I could see a situation in which there's like a specific version of this that's got under over an explosive payload with armor piercing rounds and anti barrier hand cannons on the artifact, and now it's got a little bit of an appeal there.
Yeah, I mean it is a damage perk, so I'm not surprised that it first showed up in column 4, which is where most damage perks do show up.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's one of those very selective, those niche damage perks. And what's really frustrating is Bungie moved a very similar damage perk, adaptive munitions, over to column 3 like the season after it debuted. And we have a number of weapons. I have at least a few weapons in my vault. I haven't used them a lot because adaptive munitions isn't as strong as it used to be, but they were getting adaptive munitions in column 3, and then I'd pair them with a damage perk and just go to town. And so it's kind of surprising that Under Over still hasn't made that jump on the new weapons that it comes out with. But hey, if they want to increase the mounts, that's fine. It'll just make the weapons that can get Under Over in column 3 a little bit more valuable, I suppose. But yeah, for right now, it's certainly not a perk that I think we're going to wholesale recommend to you on any weapons that we do a breakdown on. But, we'll see what the buffs are. Don't want to speak too soon.
Yeah. You mentioned Exalted Truth. That can go over, under, and or under, over, I should say, and Frenzy or Rampage in that final column. And that with Frenzy is actually pretty appealing to me. I don't know. Am I going to play Trials?
Okay.
Am I going to pick up a Trials card? What's happening? I don't know. I'm getting uncomfortable. All right. What's any other? I mean, Sword Guard rework, that was kind of a big one. Hand cannons. We already talked about hand cannons are going to be popping off. Anything else you guys want to talk about here before we move on to talk about our new exotic weapon?
I'm looking forward to the Sword Guards rework. See, it's very interesting because right now it's pretty lackluster in terms of it doesn't really give me much benefit. And we always recommend Swordmaster's Guard, which is just it juices up the rest of the other stats, and we don't really care about guarding. But other than that, I think Touch of Malice, I'm really interested in what they're referring to as big buffs. See how that feels.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited. That'll be cool. The Envious Assassin one, that kind of cracks me up. I wonder if they're going to split that out amongst heavy special and primary weapons, because it's pretty useless on primaries, right? You got to be in bare level content for that to really work the way that we want it to work on a primary. But for heavy, of course, and special weapons, it's much more valuable. And I do wonder if maybe having a cold comfort with 3 in the mag plus bipod might be a little problematic for them. But yeah, we'll see. We've got no confirmation of that, so we'll just have to see and wait. But let's talk about this exotic quest that we just did before we started recording here. It's a fun one, wasn't it, Saint? Your first time through?
Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed it, and I'm a big fan of the tormentors that can't be stunned, right? I always thought stunning the tormentors was just a bit of a bummer, because it takes such a menacing enemy and it kind of just puts them right down in place, and there's no worries after that. So I was very happy to see that the boss was unstunnable. And we had a pretty easy time going through this. Definitely enjoyed it, but we're pretty coordinated. We're bringing pretty meta stuff to the table here, so not super shocking there, I think. All right, you want to? I guess we should talk about how you get into this in the first place, right? So we've talked about fishing. You need to be fishing. You need specifically 3 exotic fish. One of them from EDZ, Nessus, and Thronewold each. And then whenever you have collected your 3 exotic fish, or you have a friend that has collected 3 exotic fish, you need to jump into Deep Dive. I mean, obviously with a squad is going to be ideal. You can get through this with a blind kind of match-made team. Just hope that they know what's going on. But we would definitely recommend grabbing a couple buds to jump into the activity here with. And then once you get in there, you're going to need to hit some specific statues and things like that to make sure that you get the mission activated. Basically, after completing the second depth, you're going to go down a little bit of an alternate path there. And you can have the person who has all the fish, or if you have all the fish, to interact with these statues as you continue moving down. There's like 3, I think, total, and then there's a few at the very end before you go into the mission area. Once you get in there, it's going to be a race against the clock. Kind of brings us back to Whisper and Outbreak, which Outbreak is probably my favorite that we've had. A 8.5 minute timer for this one when you get to that main boss arena, which 8.5 minutes, I know it's not sound like a lot of time at all, but really it's not a super long fight. You know, it's there's a lot of enemies in there, but it's not a ton that you have to deal with. Impetus, what are we fighting when we get down in here to the actual big arena of the mission?
Yeah, so there's actually 2 different types of enemies that we're going to be facing, and they're related in how we need to kill one of them to be able to damage the big one. So you'll get a bit of an introduction to this mechanic before you get into the big boss, the final boss arena. But yes, the big guy you're fighting at the very end is a boss tier tormentor that will chase you around the entire arena you're in. I guess the entire thing would be considered a labyrinth, but you'll be doing a lot of your damage to this big tormentor in the center area, which is a wide open space. But you'll need to be hunting down some minotaurs. These are mini boss minotaurs here. They spawn in various areas around this labyrinth. You got to go track them down. Killing these 3 mini boss minotaurs will give you a sharp buff that will appear on the side of your screen. It'll get stacks 1, 2, 3 as you kill them. You can split up, I think, if you're in a pretty competent fire team. Just split up and have each player go and look for one, and then solo them. They're tough. So if you don't feel like your fire team is competent enough, all 3 of you can go track them down. There will be a marker that does eventually appear for the minotaurs, alerting you to where they are on the map. Like a little objective will appear, so you can wait around for that. And especially as you get further on into the activity, as you wear the big boss tormentor's health down, they will appear in the main area as well, so you don't have to travel as far out into the labyrinth. Once you get the 3rd stack of the sharp buff, that will have a timer. That timer is the length of your damage phase. And fellas, I'll have to be honest, I can't remember how much time that is. Is it a minute? Does that sound right, or is it over a minute? I can't remember. We were obviously focused on trying to get back to the main area when we were doing it.
I want to say it was like a minute 15.
Yeah, it wouldn't be too much over a minute, but it's definitely at least a minute. So I can't remember the exact time, but yes, that is when you'll be able to do proper damage to the boss. The boss doesn't have an immune shield, but if you try to damage the buff without the sharp ×3, you're going to be seeing a lot of single-digit numbers from your weapons. So do not waste a grenade, do not waste a super until you get that sharp ×3 active, and then you can go ham here. Again, it'll be easiest for the 3 of you to damage the the boss in that central wide open area. You will have some other enemies like taken scions, taken phalanxes that might spawn in and can be a problem. So you might need to do a little bit of ad clear in the middle of that damage phase. Just again, communication with your fire team is really the biggest obstacle for a lot of people, so definitely be talking to one another. We have seen, and we do recommend Divinity, just making sure that you can get the Tormentor's crit to be as large as possible. Again, he's highly mobile. He will be jumping up. It's very much the standard Tormentor behavior, but he's a boss, so you do need to be aware of that. He will do a lot of suppressing attacks, so be aware of that when you are doing your supers. You know, if you're near bubbles and wells and stuff, that will be an issue. and if you are trying to hit him with with a Thunder Crash, he might outtime you. He might counterattack you, as Saint found out. So be aware of that. But yeah, just because of the erratic movement and the fact that hitting body shots on Tormentors does a lot of reduced damage, we do really recommend that at least one player brings in Divinity. As for the supers, Gathering Storm, Thunder Crash, Nova Bomb, Blade Barrage, Brood Weaver, all great supers there. Again, if you can deal damage at a distance where he cannot suppress you, that's really going to be the key there. Yeah, depending on the jump, some of these might miss a little bit, and you kind of have to take that L. But it's better than having the super get suppressed before he kills you. Well and Bubble, it's going to be hit or miss. Tormentor will absolutely come and track you down and knock you out of it. So be aware of that. And of course, because this is a boss tier enemy, there is no crowd control option available. So you got to be aware of that. Now, one player, of course, is going to be using Divinity. Other two players, what do they want to bring in? We were doing machine guns. Let's see, Corey, you're using Thunderlord. That's what I used for my first clear of it. Was a Divinity and 2 Thunderlords. That's definitely fine there. I switched that out for Briar's Contempt so that Origin trait could do extra damage to the Tormentor. Is that better than Thunderlord? I don't necessarily think so. The ease of use, of course, isn't better than Thunderlord, so you can definitely do that. I think, if you don't have Thunderlord, I mean, really a solid machine gun like Retrofit Escapade will do the job.
I think Briars would probably do better than Thunderlord, because Thunderlord's double damage kind of bug was fixed for this season. While Thunderlord is doing some good damage, it's not as good before. I think with what I was seeing with the 2 runs that we've done, Thunderlord with Divinity was causing the boss to stagger a lot, which is very helpful.
Yes.
You stun lock him into no longer jumping up and suppressing everyone, so that means everyone can get a much clearer shot. But I think I would need to look at like a damage generator sheet just to check if a linear fusion rifle, as long as you get those crits in, plus the origin trait, plus the artifact trait, which buffs it up even more, I think it will be better. But again, it's all reliant on, Thunderlord just requires you to spray. And it's a big enough bubble, but Briar's Contempt and other LFRs, they're still good. If you miss those shots, if you get a body shot, you're doing 50 damage.
Yeah.
And because we don't, on this show, a lot of the content we talk about and break down, it's mostly 3 person activities. We talk about raids as well, where Divinity is obviously a good option, but we don't tend to recommend Divinity because it does take someone out of a damage class. Whereas the reason why we're recommending Divinity here is because of, as you mentioned there, is if you hit body shots, you are doing very reduced damage. It's not like other combatants where you're just doing body damage. Here you're doing, I'm not entirely sure what the reduced damage is, but it's a big malice, and that Divinity bubble is big enough where you don't necessarily really aim for the center. As long as you're hitting that the cage, you're doing a good job. So it is interesting that we have kind of finally recommended Divinity as this is very top tier, despite it being nerfed from 30% down to 15%. Still a great weapon to use.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah, this is a brutal one. We have not had a mission like this in a long time. I saw some people on social media comparing this to the original D1 Whisper mission, because you were going into an existing activity and then taking an alternate path that also had a timer, reminding them of that. And I never got to play that, but I was like, oh yeah, I can see some of the similarities there. So this doesn't, the quest doesn't have like a name really. You're going into the deep dive activity and then you activate an additional harder path to go get the exotic weapon.
Sivu Araf refers it as the whetstone. That's WHET stone.
Okay.
As the activity, but yeah, I don't, because there's no direct director kind of node to click on. We're not entirely sure what the name is, but I think people have been referring it as whetstone, or it's in the lore as being referred to as the whetstone. Something like that is my
Just a great
impression.
reference, because that's the whetstone is what you would use to sharpen a sword's blade, right? Yeah, which I love. I love how Bungie does their deep
presumably
references and internal things.
This will be added to the exotic rotator mission sometime down the line, because obviously it's still active this year as part of the deep dives. But
yeah, that's a good point.
I'm guessing they'll have to detach it from deep dives once those go away for final shape. It is definitely a cutthroat type of exotic quest. It's you mentioning the Whisper mission with very similar vibes. You're up against the clock. You have to keep going. There's no taking a moment, as one of the parts of the deep dive we were doing today with Saint. Saint had to take a little moment. It's like, well, that better be your final take a moment, because
I'm just sitting there messing with my leg mods on my armor.
Yeah, so really fun, but you got to be prepared. And because this is attached to the deep dive activity, you can go in there with a match-made team, but I would not recommend it. It's not it. It's definitely not it.
Let's talk about this weapon. The Wicked Implement. It is a stasis precision scout rifle. It's 180 RPM. So think, hung jury, right? Is kind of like a good comparison here. And when we were looking at its base stats here, unsurprisingly, it follows that exotic trend, and it has got some really solid base stats. We're doing 62 range, 63 stability, and 44 handling, which, again, if we were just going to compare this to like the base of a hung jury, that's at 49 range, 55 stability, and 50 handling. So very good. Definitely really strong sets there. 41 reload speed, which is pretty low, but that is helped out by the exotic traits we'll talk about in just a second. 20 zoom, 94 recoil direction, which is really high, and then 15 in the mag. There are no real options to talk about here, right? The exotics, they're just kind of fixed except for our craftable ones. So nothing crazy there, but things start to heat up when we get into our exotic trait here, creeping attrition. Scoring 3 precision hits within 3.5 seconds of each other grants creeping attrition for 3.5 seconds. Additional precision hits refresh this duration. Creeping attrition makes all precision hits apply 40 stacks of slow for 4 seconds. So that is going to be 20 in PvP, or like 40, right? Like I said, in PvE. And then if you put on Durance, which is Whisper of Durance, it's going to be one of your fragments there for stasis. You can get 8 seconds in PvE or 6 seconds in PvP. So 3 precision hits for freeze. And something we'll be talking about a little bit more later on in this episode, but this means that this thing has some direct tie-ins for overload slow and then unstoppable freeze to shatter counter, and then kind of a little bit of barrier counter. If you can catch them right, you can freeze and prevent them from pulling up their barrier. And we've got some other synergies here and a bunch of different stuff like that we can kind of pull in with this. I'll say, well, first, what is our other half of this exotic trait, and then where can we kind of take this?
Yeah, so the exotic trait is Tithing Harvest. So precision kills while the creeping attrition buff is active create a small stasis shard that tracks to you. This is a very fast tracking shard, and at this time, we haven't noticed if there's any range where it doesn't track you. There is a 2-second cooldown between spawning these small shards. And then, of course, collecting stasis shards, and this applies to any stasis shards, not the ones generated by Tithing Harvest, fully refills the weapon's magazine. So that is the perk that appears next to your barrel magazine in stock. This gun does have a catalyst. At the time of recording, it is not currently accessible, but it is showing in-game. The Wicked Implement Catalyst will overflow the magazine when picking up stasis shards. Presumably, we're basing this on the behavior of the Tithing Harvest exotic trait. This will apply to any stasis shard, not just the ones generated by the weapon. So that would, if we're assuming that's a standard overflow, take that up to 30 in the magazine. A lot of cool synergy going on. I think a lot of people were not too thrilled when this dropped, but this is definitely going to be a strong PvE weapon. Let's probably start with the stasis shard synergies here. So stasis shards provide melee gains. The small shard will give you 10% melee energy upon return. Then if you are using the Whisper of Hunger fragment, that gets bumped up to 17.5% melee energy return whenever you pick up a stasis shard. If we start talking about a few other things, we'll start with another fragment. This is Whisper of Rhyme. So small shards will heal you for 12 HP. If you already have full HP, you instead gain a stasis overshield up to 100 HP, which does last for 10 seconds. And additional shards refresh the duration and heal it. That's, to me, that interaction right there is where I see a lot of strong in-game PvE synergy right there. I now have a weapon. It's not just my abilities. I now have a weapon that's going to be giving me a lot of stasis shards that do track to me, right? So I can be behind cover, blinking at enemies, popping or stunning various champions with the various ability effects, and then I get stasis shards coming to me, and I'm picking up that overshield so that I'm a little bit more comfortable peeking out of cover and actually engaging with enemies in a different capacity. So that's the big one to me. It still keeps going, though. It gets better. With the Elemental Charge mod, picking up stasis shards adds to a counter at 100% counter. You will gain 1 stack of armor charge. So again, this is another great way to get stacks of armor charge relatively safely here. So for stasis shards specifically, 1 mod of elemental charge gives you about 25% to that counter. 2 times mods, it's about 34% to that counter. And then 3 times mods, shards get 50%. So again, a lot of options here. If you want to go down the overshield route, that's fantastic. If you also want to stack on top of that some of the elemental charge or the armor charge options and the various benefits you can get from that through the elemental charge mod, you've got it there. But again, it keeps going. Let's look at our weapons now. We've got a new perk out this season, Collective Action. So that's collecting one of the elemental pickups. In this case, it's still a stasis shard. Provides a 20% damage buff to that weapon for 7 seconds. More stasis shard pickups increases the duration up to 12 seconds. And again, the shards are coming to us from the weapon's behavior, so you don't even have to move, and you're getting an extra damage buff for other weapons that have collective action, which is really, really wonderful. Collective action does activate even when the weapon is stowed, and it does not matter what your subclass is, so you don't even need to be on stasis. You can just have the Wicked Implement weapon out doing its thing, and you're going to be proccing collective action on a weapon in a different slot there. So those are kind of your general ones here. I'm going to pass you back to Cord as we kind of talk about some specific subclass synergies here that exist with stasis shards.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like special weapons in your middle slot, Tech Enforce and Greasy Luck. That's kind of the ones that kind of came to me immediately. We talked about Tech Enforce last week's episode. A lot of juice perks in there, but if you do want to go down the route of collective action, then there you go. Very strong fusion rifle for PvE. Yes, in terms of other kind of miscellaneous synergies, you can use in conjunction with Hunter's Grim Harvest, Titan's Tectonic Harvest, and Warlock's Glacial Harvest. All of these aspects allow for stasis shards to be spawned by various modifiers. You can really stack up on the stasis shard creation. More so for Grim Harvest and Glacial Harvest. I'll just mention quickly here, Tectonic Harvest. There isn't really it's kind of a detached way because you're doing shattering stasis crystals to get a small shard. So there isn't really a kind of a way to double up with the Wicked Implement. But for Hunters with Grim Harvest, killing slowed enemies spawns a stasis shard. So this is what I mean by doubling up. If you kill that enemy that's been spawning those stasis shards for you, you'll get an additional shard. Now, the type of shard that you do get, bear in mind this isn't one that tracks to you. It's just the one that spawns after death. Rank and file enemies give a small shard, just one, and all the other enemies, elites, mini-bosses, champions, and bosses, give you a large shard, which is quite rare. I think it's only hunters that have access to large shards. Obviously, your teammates can pick these up. They are available for all those that are in the fire team or just in the general area if they're friendly. But large shards give you 50% melee energy back, and if you are running hunger on top of that, it is 75%. So really good for hunters who obviously have two shurikens that they can use. Glacial Harvest for the Warlocks, same kind of idea. When you're freezing an enemy, it creates a stasis shards around the enemy, and the quantity of which gives you. It depends on the classification for the enemy here as well. So rank and file is 1 small shard, elites it's 2, and mini bosses, champions, and bosses are 3 times. You could also double these up. I did mention that all of these are stasis shards that do not track to you unless you're using Whisper of Conduction, where stasis shards within 15 meters are pulled towards after a 1 second delay. So Wicked Implement definitely gives you that range aspect that you can really hone in with Whisper of Rhyme, which is the one I was also thinking as a really great candidate as a stasis subclass. I use Whisper of Rhyme all the time with my hunter, but for the safe option, that's very easy to sustain a stasis overshield with Wicked Implement. Very easy to get those stasis shards. But if you want to double up on all these stasis shards as well, Grim Harvest and Glacial Harvest for your hunters and warlocks respectively. Any final comments before we kind of move on to our main topic of the episodes, lads?
I was just thinking Whisper of Chains. I think it's Chains too that gives you DR when you're near a crystal.
Yep.
Man.
Or frozen targets. It's not just the crystal, it's frozen targets.
Oh
too.
Yeah, that's right. Between Chains and Rhyme and Conduction with Wicked Implement, you put on Durance. This is some pretty stellar damage reduction. This is pushing into some woven mail territory, which is definitely the Strand specialty, right, with the amount of DR that's offering, but pretty strong defensive case.
Hunters and Titans also have the ability to get 5 fragments, so you can really stack up on all these fragments. Unfortunately, Warlocks only have 2 for each aspect. But still, you can 4 fragments for some really solid. 4 aspects slots to give you 4 fragment. Really stack up here. I was also thinking Whisper of Hadrons as well, which is on freeze. You just get that insane bonus of plus 60 mobility, resilience, and recovery, and it's around about 30 stability, plus 15 AA and 20 AE. Just for freezing a combatant. It's really easy to do with Wicked Implement.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a champion. Just keep getting those freezes in. Get those big bonuses.
Yeah, I definitely think this thing is gonna be a PvE stay, especially if we finally get a season with some stasis, stuff kind of catered towards the artifact mods, a little bit catered towards stasis. But I mean, even just on its own right, because of how effective it's going to be against champions, it's feeling pretty strong out of the gate here, which is not. I don't think that has been their perception. I think you may have mentioned this earlier, but I don't feel like people see this weapon as very strong, which is weird to me, honestly.
Yeah, if you don't see all the connections to our existing sandbox, and again, there's a lot of them, so it's not a criticism of the general Destiny populace. I mean, that's why we do the show, is to remind people of all this stuff. But yeah, on paper, I can understand if you're like, well, if it just makes shards, and shards only give me melee energy, that doesn't seem really relevant because it's a scout rifle, it's a mid to long range. Like, I don't really get that. But no, shards are a very flexible thing, and you just got to look for those connections there to really take advantage of all of that stuff. So a lot of opportunities for it. But yeah, I mean, I think people will probably come around once we do get that stasis artifact support that we've been clamoring for. And speaking of artifact support and the state of stasis and all sorts of other topics, let's transition over to the vibe check, the PvE meta vibe check that we've been kind of waiting to do. I don't think, have we done one of these before? We've alluded to doing it. We've made some offhand comments, I think, but
we've been wanting to do this for a while. But ever since they've been talking about, we're going to buff XYZ, especially after Witch Queen, I think we've been talking about it since then. It's like, but every season they've added some commentary of like, we're going to be buffing rocket launchers. We've got these specific perks coming up. We've got all these exotics that are getting some subclass synergy, and I think we've reached a point where we've got upcoming buffs. We've got obviously hand cannons are coming up, but we can make more kind of educated guess as to where these kind of lie. I know, Saint, you mentioned Mossy Maxie's kind of spreadsheets and charts and graphs, and we do have that for this episode just to kind of refer to. So yes, we are aware hand cannons haven't been buffed yet, but I think it's fair to finally sit down and get a nice little vibe check of the weapons. I think we'll cover abilities at large and exotic armor another episode, maybe next week, following week. But this is all about weapons. So sit down, grab a nondescript alcohol beverage, and let's vibe out. Speaking of subclasses and abilities, just to kind of tie in with the weapons, how are we feeling? So we've got little notes here. I think we're all in agreement here that Strand and Void have some incredible power on all three classes, especially with like subclass synergy as well.
Yeah.
I think you put this here, saying Titans are living up in the PvE at the moment. Arc for damage, Strand for CC, crowd control, and Void for support.
I feel like I feel like I have an option for whatever role I need to fill, and that part of the sandbox is really good. I mean, when I did the Moon Psyops Battleground, it was just 3 Titans. It was a Strand Titan, it was a Void Titan, and I was an Arc Titan, and we got through that. I'm not going to say no problem because it was long. It took a long time, and that GM is a slog, and it's tough, but we managed perfectly fine as just a group of 3 Titans, and I think that really makes me feel like the class has such a wide range of viability in its kit. I haven't been using Solar Titan a ton just because I think that there's a lot of contributing factors to the way the Radiance stacks and with other weapon damage buff and the way that Void Titan can provide so much support and the way that Arc Titan can deal the damage. I feel like those kind of excel more in their individual areas that just keep me from using Solar Titan more. Even things like Consecration and using like Char and stuff like that to build onto a build with a certain shotgun that has worked its way into the meta a little bit has definitely been a lot of fun. But also say that Strand is so good at crowd control that I have just not really been using stasis, and it's kind of just been power crept by the fact that Suspend and Woven Mail are like so obscenely strong. I mean, we were just talking about we could implement in all the ways that it goes into stasis, and now maybe this is kind of like bringing that back up a little bit, but I mean, I ran stasis for so long because of the way that it would interact with Font of Might in that whole build. But it's kind of funny to think that this DPS output build was what was keeping me on stasis in reality and not like the crowd control aspect of it. Because when it comes to the crowd control, I'm usually going Strand. And I think that, I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say, but I think that that Warlock stasis is still the strongest IMO because of a particular build. But Impetus, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about your Warlock classes in general? How do you feel about stasis and the Warlock? Is it still strong? Is it still worth using?
Yeah, so I guess if I'm breaking it into your categories of damage, crowd control, and support, I think we all know what the support option is. That has not changed in years, and that's still, of course, the most dominant form of support for in-game, the Solar Warlock. Damage. what would we call damage? I mean, this is where I think it gets really tough for Warlocks. We've never really had an obvious damage option. It used to be Chaos Reach, and Chaos Reach certainly has been buffed now, but Arc Warlock, I think, outside of Chaos Reach, that ability kit is just more towards being support, right? With Fallen Sunstar and Coldheart, like the pros of that over a strictly damage build of like just focusing all in on Chaos Reach, getting your Chaos Reach as quickly as possible, and then slapping on what are those boots called? I know I've got you somewhere here.
Oh, Geomag.
Geomag, yeah. Slapping on your Geomags, you're just leaving too much on the table. So I don't even know. I mean, Void maybe for damage. Nova Bomb is definitely not in a good spot, but besides that, it'd probably be Strand, but Strand Warlock is also really good for crowd control. So yeah, I don't know. Like, what is our? We definitely have options for crowd control in a way that we haven't had in a while. Stasis is great at shutting things down, but I will have to wait and see what these threadling buffs look like, but because it very well could be the case that if they are substantial enough, and it seems like a lot of our abilities or our sandbox teams at Bungie are just throwing massive numbers onto these buffs recently, it could be the case that Broodweaver Warlock becomes best for damage and best for crowd control, just because the threadlings can go seek out enemies while I'm hiding behind cover, reloading, waiting for my shield to generate, and I can also use it just to rip enemies apart with my super. So I don't know. I mean, Stasis Warlock is certainly a comfort. We've got a lot of options there. We can certainly make a lot of Stasis shards, and again, that's such a flexible elemental pickup that I love it so much. There's so much I can do with it. The turrets are crazy strong. Osmomancy is crazy strong, but it's not great for damage. I'm just freezing things. I'm just slowing them down. That puts a lot of pressure on my weapons. I've talked about this before. You got to really have a juiced damage profile with your weapons when you're running Stasis Warlock, because you can't rely on your abilities to actually kill things with the same way that you can on Strand. I mean, my goodness, the Strand melee is incredible. It's so lethal for all three classes, and I've got 3 charges of that on Warlock, and it's it's such a silly thing, but like I find myself during the Lightfall campaign, whenever I'm on Strand, I was being like, well, I'm out of my grenade, I'm out of my class ability, I've got the melee, I'm down to my last option here. I go throw out that one Strand melee, and then it just completely kills the miner into me. I'm like, oh yeah, this is really strong. I need to like use this more often. This actually does the job, and I've got 3 charges of this. So yeah, Strand's just in a crazy strong spot for Warlocks right now. We got the little bit of damage, a little bit of crowd control, and then of course, as you said, the woven mail there for the support. Like we can kind of touch on all 3 of those aspects. But if I had to really break it up, I don't know where Strand could do both damage and crowd control depending on how you play for it, and then you've got Solar Warlock for support. So it's a weird spot to be in. I want Stasis. I want Stasis in general to get buffed. We have some great Stasis exotic weapons. Like, honestly, I think of maybe I would go so far as to say maybe across all of the elements, Stasis is probably the most well represented. I think maybe Kinetics, if we want to consider that an element, probably have the best offerings overall. But I mean, between Augur Scepter, Wicked Implement, I guess they're kind of lacking on the heavy side. Maybe I'll take that back.
Yeah, we got Winter Bite.
Well, yeah, okay. Salvation's Grip. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's up there, It's strong for sure, but the ability stuff, man, is just not there yet. It's just not there. Court, how do you feel about your respective class and Stasis on your respective class?
Again, I don't want to go too much deep into the rabbit hole of abilities and the subclass sandbox. I feel like that is definitely an episode we should dedicate for all the elements. Yeah. We're in a really good spot here, halfway through, or coming up for halfway through Lightfall, so it's like a good spot to kind of take all of them and rank them in a sense. But real quick though, I am kind of the same with for Hunters with Strand. It's kind of can be used for ad clear, but also can be used for damage with the super. Obviously, Strand Suspend is getting knocked back, so Hunters will obviously, that is one of our key verbs, if you want to call it. that is getting knocked back, but I'm okay with that. I think it is way too strong when you do compare it to another crowd control class, and that is Stasis. I still maintain Stasis Hunter is really good. It's in a reasonably good spot. I absolutely acknowledge that Stasis right now is just it takes second fiddle to Strand. The rest of the elements, Arc, really, like, I think for all classes, Arc is like the raw damage, and it's the exact same for Hunter, whether you're using Gathering Storm or you're using Arc Staff. I don't use Solar a lot on Hunter. That's just a personal preference rather than it not being like strong. It absolutely is strong, whether it's Blade Barrage or Golden Gun, and then the actual subclass loop is one of the best in the game. And then I suppose I've saved the best / worst to last here. Void Hunter, I make it work. And, you know, I am the resident Void Hunter. It's one of my favorite subclasses in the game out of all the subclasses across all the classes. But I will absolutely agree that there is still a slight loop missing with Void Hunter. You know, think of like a ring and it's 90% all the way around. There's that 10% that's missing, and it's just something that we need for Void Hunters to really close out that loop. Ger Falcons is great, you know, Graviton Lance and Collective Obligation, but those aren't always readily available. You might want to use something else. And like, I'm a big proponent when it comes to, yes, exotics should be kind of there to close out loops, but they shouldn't be the absolute catalyst. They shouldn't be the highlight. They're there just to amplify your build. If your build starts off at, you know, 0.5% multiplier instead of that 1x, then, you know, that's where things become a problem. And because Void Hunter's all built into Invis, that's their main gimmick, I just hope that we get some sort of kind of mini overhaul for Void Hunter, just kind of spread out the other verbs. Because there's 6 verbs with Void. It's one of the most densely compacted subclass synergy in the game. You know, you've got Devour, you've got Suppression, you've got Volatility, you've got Weaken, and you've got Void Overshield, and then obviously you've got... did I mention Devour? Yeah, I did. Yeah. But I just want more avenues for Hunter to tap into all those, rather than it just being all about Invis. So that's my big complaint. And to be honest, I've seen a lot of commentary from Reddit or Twitter, wherever, folks asking for like an additional melee, and I agree. I kind of want a ranged melee for Void Hunter. If it's almost like a Void version of Shuriken, where you throw your Void knife and it weakens, or something like that. The smoke bomb, yes, it can be used as close range and it can be used at range, but it's just such a mediocre melee here, and I just want to see like an overhaul. But yeah, I'll save the rest of my kind of commentary and rant for Void Hunter for another episode. But yeah, let's move over to the weapon archetypes. So I've got some comments here. We're feeling that trace rifles are especially hot. I think especially with this season, with it being the overload mod. And to be honest, all of the elemental exotic trace rifles, they're feeling really good. Divinity is obviously the kind of exception here, because it's its own thing. I don't think of it being a trace rifle. I just think of it being a support weapon. But when we're talking about elemental exotic trace rifles, we've got Prometheus Lens for Solar, Ruinous Effigy, and Wave Splitter for Void. We've got Cold Heart for Arc. We've got Agar Scepter for Stasis, and obviously fairly recently we've got the Navigator for Strand. So all great choices. How are we feeling? Trace rifles.
I mean, I first got onto Wave Splitter last season when Volatile Flow was a thing, but it's maintained its slot in my loadout just because of how much damage this thing can output. part of this conversation comes from, we're referencing a lot of stuff, right? We're referencing this stuff from Mossy. We're referencing these charts from Maix and Rock DC. But when you bring trace rifles in and compare them to like your other, primary weapons and stuff like that, because kind of another part of our conversation is, it's very easy to treat your trace rifle like a primary weapon. They just put out so much damage. And then when you throw on that extra damage to miners on top of that, and then you add in something like the exotic trait from Wave Splitter is giving you up to 40% extra damage, kind of as it oscillates between its buff phases. I think it's like 20 to 40% or something like that. And it's just obscene how easily you can mow through a crowd. And the same exact thing goes for Cold Heart. I mean, using Cold Heart just this week in the GM, right? Going through the GM, it is incredibly powerful to just mow down ads. You can beam overloads with it. You can deal solid damage against them. And their ammo economy is so good. Yeah, I mean, and you add in the fact that they're always overcharged. I mean, it's just, it's crazy.
Just to point out,
Court.
Wave Splitter is 32% for the first wave oscillation, and then 69% for the second. Obviously, it randomly oscillates between those two. But we are in a Orb of Power meta, so Wave Splitter got a massive indirect buff after, the consolidation down to Orbs of Power. And yeah, last season was Wave Splitter meta, but it's still really good now.
Yeah. How about you, Impetus? You've been running that ball in Sunstar. How you feeling about trace rifles at the moment?
Dude, I love Cold Heart, that's really all I can say. That it just works, guys. It really, truly is. Yeah, I don't know. I'm someone who's open to having, damage and support roles on different elements. And so being able to just get off of Solar Warlock and be able to provide buffs to my teammates and also just keep my abilities flowing freely, it feels awesome. So yeah, love Fallen Sunstar, love the weapon tie in there. Again, Warlocks seem to be really blessed with that kind of sweet synergy between exotic weapons and an exotic armor piece. Hopefully, Hunters and Titans get to see more of that soon. But yeah, I mean, it is a good synergy that doesn't, negate either your heavy or your kinetic slot. In the case of Cold Heart, also feels really nice. Like, I've been saying I'm looking for a weapon that's in the kinetic slot that'll have collective action, that I can, have that extra synergy, that extra tie into the ionic traces, just for a free damage buff that activates while I've got Cold Heart out. And then, of course, I've got my heavy weapon, so I can still bring it into a damage scenario, and I'm not tied up by the fact that my exotic is used on a trace rifle. Just feels good. I mean, Arc Warlock kit is fun. You've got some great potential there. A little bit of damage, a little bit of support, great crowd control options as usual. So I love trace rifles, man. It's been really fun. I loved Wave Splitter. Prometheus Lens, a lot of people don't like Prometheus Lens. I think it's quite cool. I mean, it's probably the best incandescent option that we have right now when it comes to our trace rifles, and we do have 2 solar legendary trace rifles. I don't run incandescent on either one of them, so I just save that for Prometheus Lens when I want to go burn stuff, and it's always fun to burn.
Yeah. I was gonna just put the context numbers here. If we're talking about like putting damage out towards miners, most trace rifles, even their legendary counterparts, are going to be doing as much damage as they're kind of in like the sidearm territory, which is the highest family of damage output for primary weapons. But the thing is that you don't have to be within 10 meters of something. It's like, a lot of these trace rifles are hitting ranges of 30 plus meters. So you're dealing sidearm damage or best in class primary damage or better, or even better if you're using one of these exotics and you're hitting 30 plus meters.
It's kind of funny to me that, sorry, Court, if you don't mind if I'll interrupt you here.
Yeah, go for it.
It's funny that Witch Queen, we really hyped up glaives as the new weapon archetype, but kind of, we didn't really or they gloss over the fact that we had just gotten our first legendary trace rifle half a season earlier in the 30th anniversary with the retrace path. But I feel like looking back on the last year, trace rifles have actually been like the new hotness more so than glaives. They've continued to get new legendary variants for all the different types of elements. We also did get, of course, Navigator. That's brand new. They're good, man. And they've buffed the older ones, the existing exotic ones, to a place now where they're great to use. They've got excellent sandbox synergy. Like, it's so funny to me that it was always like, well, we're working on the glaives. It was like, well, okay, you also are doing great with the trace rifles. Keep that coming too. Like,
Yeah.
don't have a lot of notes
Yeah.
for those. You guys nailed that part.
No, I was just going to kind of echo that same sentiment where I think out of all the weapons that we're going to talk about this in this episode, I think trace rifles they've had such a great glow up and they're in a really great spot, and it ties into the whole kind of double special loadout which is our kind of next point here. Just like shout out to like my favorite trace rifle has to be Agriceptor, just with the whole fantasy around stasis. I know we've been kind of just not really all that great with stasis sandbox currently, but Agriceptor still performs, and it is just a great trace rifle. But it's not the exception. Like, all of these trace rifles are great. And yeah, like Prometheus Lens, I also see that same sentiment impetus where folks are kind of dismissing it, and it's like, well, it's the best solar incandescent scorch trace rifle. You do not need a legendary, because that thing is doing like triple the work. And like Ruinous Effigy is just one of my like kind of fan favorites, because it looks so good, and it's got a great mini game with the whole kind of suppression transmutation spheres. It's a great trace rifle. But yeah, honestly, like major thumbs up to the trace rifles, even the legendaries as well. They're a really good spot. But in terms of double special loadouts, they are still continuing to be incredibly strong. Obviously, this ties into trace rifles because we use them as kind of pseudo auto rifles. So they are easy to maintain and in almost all end game activities. And this does have like a rippling effect on the rest of the weapon sandbox, because it can invalidate primaries despite their continued buffs. And we do have a section later on just talking about primaries specifically, but we'll get to that later. But how are we feeling with double special? I know we're all kind of loving it at the moment, but like it's too good. The ammo economy is too good. It's just a lot of great options. And who's using Revision Zero? Who's using malfeasance? Yeah, they are some very niche choices, but I'm not using them. I'm using a chill clip fusion rifle with Cold Heart or some other exotic special.
Yeah, and this is something that obviously was hugely popular, and then I can't remember. It's been I want to say over a year now that they came out with patch notes that basically said that the ammo economy has been changed for the rates and ways that special ammo is spawned. But if you've paid attention to any of the testing that has like gone on recently around the way that the ammo economy works, and when we're talking about that, we're talking about the rate at which different types of ammo bricks spawn depending on the ways and types of enemies that you're killing, the things that you're killing them with, the weapons that you're using. It is definitely that whatever fix was implemented back then. I don't know if it just didn't work or if it just wasn't enough, but I think in the past like 2 or 3 seasons, people have really started to catch back onto the fact that it wasn't enough, and you can still really easily manage double special, and there are definitely things in this game that make that even easier. For a long time, we had the Aeon gauntlets. Now we've got the boat helmet, the Navigator, right? Just making it even easier to circumvent this whole thing. And then we have Overload Trace Rifle, just adding on, if you needed another reason to be able to do this. Scepter can already do overloads. I believe Wave Splitter could already suppress, right? As if you held it on, so that's like overload as well. And I mean, Scepter could even freeze. So it's like they already have some champion counters built into these guys. they're so strong, and the ammo economy is just there to support them. I've used Cold Heart a little bit, but my other loadout that I've been running in the GM this week is Arbalest and Path of Least Resistance, because I've got my barrier one shots, take out the snipers from range, no problem. And then Path of Least Resistance, especially with like shock and awe this season, is just going absolutely crazy. Which is tough because they're, things are getting pushed into such a good spot, but it's like, it's just like the weapons keep getting pumped up and pumped up and pumped up, but my loadout is not changing dramatically, which is I don't know. Well, go ahead.
For some of these weapons to succeed, others have to fall, and I think we've reached that impasse where some weapons and whatever, if they do have any plans to tweak around with any of these, some of these may have to take a hit, and I think I'm all for it because it has kind of wiped a lot of options out of the kind of the choice for these like grandmasters. And like I absolutely acknowledge, like, we've been talking about Revision Zero and how like potent it is, but I'm still not prepared to bring it in because it's like I'll just bring in a double special loadout. I'll just bring in Wave Splitter plus Chill Clip Riptide, and then like I don't know, a heavy machine gun or a linear fusion rifle, because it's much more potent. So like my point here is that some of these things may have to fall just to allow everything else to succeed, because I feel like as we kind of talk about, we do sometimes reach these kind of pillars where power creep settles in, and I think it's starting to do that. We'll see. Sorry, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, I think the interesting part of this conversation too is glaives. We've got Unsought Glaive this season 2. Yeah, I mean, how are you guys feeling about glaives? Have you been taking any of the M? Because I think it was really interesting. Just you pointed out just a second ago that trace rifles and legendary trace rifles and glaives are really like very close in age. Yeah, Imtis, how you feeling about ammo economy? How you feeling about glaives these days?
I don't use double special. I think that's a path I don't want to go down, because then I'm just going to get hooked on it and get really frustrated when it when it gets changed, and it will get changed. I mean, they've said that they tried to change it originally, that didn't work. So I mean, it's clearly something that they want to address. Yeah. But I'm very much in the camp of prevent players from putting 2 special weapons on at the same time. Take me back to D1. We can still do the double primary.
Oh wow!
So oh yeah.
You're that okay? We've got a hardliner over here.
That's right.
He didn't say vanilla D2. Okay, that's
no. Well,
no special, no double special whatsoever.
No double special whatsoever, dude. Just take it away. Take it away right now. All right,
we're gonna have some angry comments.
You want to bring challenge back to Destiny 2? You take away double specials, Bungie. That's how you do it, right there.
Man.
Okay. That is my honest opinion. I mean, if you want to explain like why people get burnt out, it's because they keep giving us primary weapons and there's no reason to use them, right? Like how many primary weapons are in Last Wish, right? We've all unlocked them. You got, you want to craft them because there's good rolls, but you don't actually want to craft them because you're not actually going to use them. So those nice shiny little weapon models are going to sit in your vault next to all the other primary weapons you don't use because you're in double special, and that sucks, right? That's just not how you should play the game. That's why I have such a hardcore opinion on the double special thing. It's like, I've got easily over 100 weapons in my vault that I have no reason to touch right now because they are just primaries. That's it. Like, it's not even whether or not they're good primaries or bad primaries. They're just primaries, and I don't need them at all, and I hate that.
I think this brings me into another part of this conversation where I feel like 9 times out of 10 I recommend something for a specific situation and I get one of 2 responses. Number 1 response is just use Riptide. Number 2 response is just use Forbearance. And dude, I'm like, I know I've got one sitting in the vault with whatever 12,000 kills on it or something ridiculous, and I I think that it's interesting how there are like a few of these weapons that have, in particular, like dominated this. Riptide is kind of like the product of the whole champ sandbox thing, which we'll talk about, all those changes in a second. But forbearance, man, is it going to take like forbearance getting nerfed, or has it power creeped like too far because of everything that it does, or do you think that we can have more weapons that are more desirable and just kind of move on past that? I mean, I know suggesting a forbearance nerf is also like heresy, but like it's just what everybody uses all the time, and like it's getting kind of old. Like that weapon has been around for like a year and a half now, and it just absolutely, I feel like, dominates the energy slot still to this day.
I it just goes back to my point where I think there are some things that have to fall for other things to rise, and forbearance and riptide are the two that are like way out of band. That it causes problems where we're at the stage where it's like, well, I'm not going to recommend, I don't know, like a Waveframe New Pacific Epitaph when Riptide is in the same energy slot and it's got chill clip.
Yeah.
Okay, the Epitaph can't get chill clip because it doesn't have that impact to cause chill clip's effects, but Riptide is just such a potent option for everything. It's not just champions, freezing everything. Like we talk about, like stasis is in a bad spot right now, but Riptide is one of the big exceptions where it's like, this is kind of what stasis was like when it launched. It's no longer like that right now, and it's the same with forbearance. I don't know what they could do to those weapons to really bring them down. And Merrick and Chris Proctor, they've talked about this on previous podcasts where they don't necessarily kind of tweak with individual weapons. Like we've seen it recently with like the Immortal. They've tweaked with the range stats, and they've tweaked with
like other Achilles SMG.
Yeah,
right.
But like they're not fond of doing that. They'd rather buff other things up in general, like the archetype, or bring the specific archetype down. But these weapons, I think they need that treatment. They need the kind of, we need to really chisel away at what's making these too powerful. But I probably get some angry comments because a lot of folks use them. They are very potent, and much like Impetus is talking about, no double special whatsoever, it's the same vibe for me when it comes to these weapons. It's just way out of band. So,
yeah, I don't know. It if there was ever to be an Ichlos SMG of the PvE sandbox, it's definitely forbearance. And I don't, I have to go try to dig up some specific numbers on this, but like we know that Bungie is seeing this too, right? Like if they have these statistics like they just showed off recently in the kind of upcoming weapons patch, they showed some like Tableau charts that were showing off usage and effectiveness and stuff like that too, right? I'm sure they're looking at the same thing for PvE, like they've got to. I don't know. We can move on a little bit into more of an interesting conversation. We were talking about Divinity when we were talking about the new mission that we were running. And specifically, I want to talk about Tractor Cannon, because I feel like I've definitely been using Tractor Cannon a bunch these days. When I run Last Wish, I just like run Tractor Cannon the entire raid. I mean, when I'm in Rooted Nightmares, I'm running Tractor Cannon most of the time, and I definitely, and I don't think that I'm alone. I definitely feel like this has kind of become the DPS debuff meta as we have like moved forward in the sandbox a little bit, and I'm a big fan of that. I like that Tractor Cannon is number one, it's in your heavy slot. It's not a special, and number two, it's a more of an active thing. Like you have to get up close to the boss, but you're also able to like use your debuff weapon and then swap to other weapons, abilities, whatever it is. How are you guys feeling? Do you feel the tractor cannon meta, or is this kind of some copium here? Are you missing Divinity? Are you still mad at Salt? What are the vibes?
Oh, come on. No, don't mention that. Come on. A lot of people still believe it's Salt to blame, but no. Just put it in perspective. The Divinity nerf was discussed on our Destiny Massive Breakdowns way before that commentary. Just to really put that out there. It was nothing to do with Salt. Anyway, Tracked Cannon. Yes, I've seen a little kind of resurgence with Tracked Cannon, and I'm all for it. Like, the weapon hasn't been buffed any time like lately. Because there's more activities that require kind of someone that's applying a debuff consistently, and because tractor cannon is not at the whim of ammo economy, like you're applying the tractor cannon once, you're swapping 10 seconds later back to applying. Like it's the same thing with kind of like Arbalist, where you're not necessarily using a lot of the ammo because you're one-shotting barrier champions, and the same with like Anarchy from many seasons ago, where again you wouldn't necessarily run out of anarchy shots because you're only using 2 every time for up to like 20 seconds. So I'm loving seeing Tracked Cannon. I hope to see more of it. It's 30%. It's the only debuff outside of Felwinter's Helm, which is the Warlock's Helmet, which requires a little bit of a minigame to apply. And then you've obviously got the 2 tethers, which isn't necessarily something that you can have up active all the time. So bring a Tracked Cannon in, constant 30% versus Divinity's 15%. I've seen people using Tracked Cannon against Orcs more often.
Yeah, on his hands, right?
Yeah, because there's no point to use Divinity. You might as well have someone bring in a sniper rifle plus Tracked Cannon, and then there you go. Easy 30%.
I think the sniper rifle part is the key thing there. I think we need a sniper rifle buff in PvE for tractor cannon to really come out. Because that one person applying tractor cannon, you either got to swap to a different heavy weapon, lose ammo in the process, or you gotta, the number of options that are available to you for dealing damage in those 10 seconds after you've applied is quite limited compared to what your fire team is using. And in a 6-person content like a raid, that's not going to be a huge loss of damage, but like as you and I have been doing a lot, Saint, we've been bringing tractor cannon in for Ekthar in the dungeon. You've only got 3 people there. Your DPS absolutely matters if you're trying to hit that 1 phase or the 2 phase to actually farm it effectively, which is kind of why we're bringing tractor cannon in the first place. So it's a tight window, and you got to really have some banger slug shotguns in your kinetic and energy slot to follow up doing that close range damage. Well, it's not just slugs, I should say, but you got to have shotguns in your kinetic and energy slot to really bring out some strong stuff, or a strong fusion rifle. So yeah, I think if we're good on the fusion rifles, right? We've got excellent damage options there, but if we can get a sniper buff so that you can have a little bit of a longer range option for someone like Oryx that does have that crit spawn, I think we'd be in a good spot for tractor cannon.
I've been using well, you mentioned other options. Cartesian has been like my go-to, right? When I'm fighting Nezi or I'm fighting Oryx and I'm using tractor cannon. And
now we got controlled burst on a few newer fusion rifles. So there's even options there amongst the fusion rifle damage perks.
But I'm with you, which I think that kind of brings us to another point of, okay, sniper rifles. Sniper rifles just continue to be buffed. And they're getting there. They don't seem to quite be there though, right? I mean maybe another 10% here, kind of a buff, and I think maybe that really does open that up. Like you're talking about, just all of a sudden you got sniper rifles on the table. You can swap to your supremacy and use our ridiculous ammo economy role we were talking about last week, or maybe like a bait and switch role, which really plays into tractor cannon, and put out some great damage. But I still don't think snipers are quite there, right?
No, they're not. but we have so many good sniper rifle rules. At this point, I'm kind of dreading that buff because we'll probably have to dedicate an entire episode to covering the best sniper rifles because there are just simply so many good options across all of the elements, and they're all very accessible to get. I mean, yeah, I've got sniper rifles in here in my vault that I've gotten from Banshee. I've gotten, we've got plenty of adept options that I've got from various raids. We've got craftable ones like you wouldn't believe. I mean, yeah. Should the day come that sniper rifles become meta, there will be so many options for people to take into various activities for matching up their surges and overcharges and all that good stuff. But yeah.
Court, any comments on our primary or special stuff, or you guys want to head into the third rung here with our heavy meta or DPS meta?
I'm good. I don't have much else comments.
Well, I think you may have a few on this subject of rockets, which are pretty firmly at the top. Right,
well established.
yeah. The DPS kings right now, as it's listed here on our sheet, and we have there's some other options in the mix depending on the scenario, right? But there's been so much pressure put on rocket launchers. Now we've shifted from a linear meta kind of to a rockets meta for the most part with a lot of the nerfs that we've seen outside of a few specific scenarios. I think. Do you guys feel that like the punishment of missing a rocket kind of is okay, or that's kind of the way that allows rockets to be meta because you really need to be hitting every shot, and how punishing that is? Are you missing our LFR meta? I mean, how are you guys feeling about our current DPS meta?
I'm not missing the LFR meta, to be honest. I mean, LFRs are still good now. I think just people are putting too much emphasis on it being nerfed to the ground when they haven't. But they're not in the same ballpark now, which is fine. Again, some of these weapons have to fall to make others rise. In terms of rockets, though, I was never a fan of recommending tracking module for those rockets that don't have it intrinsically. But I've kind of really warmed to tracking module because we're getting a lot more activities which bosses and various enemy types are more mobile. They're moving around. They're not as stationary. Like, I'm thinking when we did the exotic quest today, I would have never recommended doing rockets because the Tormentor is ducking and diving everywhere, and it's like there's no way my rockets are going to land consistently. Plus, like, you get much better benefit using something that can do precision damage. So yeah, rocket launchers. Mm-hmm. There are activities in the game where rockets are just not they're not the play, and I'd rather use something else. But I think they're in a really good spot just now. I mean, technically speaking, they were never buffed up. They were always good around the LFR meta. And again, it's the same scenario where some situations you could have rockets doing damage over LFRs, despite the fact that LFRs were like the big, the king DPS meta. I think we're in a good spot in terms of heavy weapon damage. Machine guns are obviously never going to be the DPS meta, but we have some good kind of ammo efficient machine guns, ad clearing. We've got some, heavy exotic options like Xenophage and Thunderlord that can be used for kind of single target or even sustained damage, like perfectly viable weapons. They're not necessarily the best ones, but they're there to be used, and you can use them if you want, if you don't have any other options. But I think heavy weapon wise, we're in a really good spot. I think heavy grenade launchers, I just kind of wish didn't really exist because I don't know where they can fit those in the sort of sandbox. Are they ad clear? Are they single target? Maybe kind of single target is something that they should go towards. You dump up on like 6 grenades from your launcher on a champion and get rid of it. But I've never really been a big fan of heavy grenade launchers, to be honest. But I'm looking forward to whatever the potential sword meta may be with the rework to the guard. So, yeah, overall, everything's looking pretty good. Impetus, what's your vibes here?
I mean, yeah, I would prefer an LFR meta, but I cannot say that with Divinity existing. Like on paper, I do believe that hitting a headshot should award, hitting, I should say, a critical spot should award the highest amount of damage, right? But when you have a weapon that blows up the critical spot to a much larger target, then that kind of sucks all the wind out of my preferences. So I keep myself quiet. I understand why LFRs were brought down. I understand why Divinity had to be touched. That's only fair. It blew everything else out of the water. But yeah, I mean, as far as rockets go, I really did enjoy having that synergy with old Starfire Protocol. Having that demo rocket launcher, doing that what did I use? Wither Horde or Osteostriga to apply damage ticks, and then working on that loop, going through that loop of grenade, rocket, grenade. That was an expression of skill, and I am bummed that has been gutted in the way that it has. I understand that it was outputting a lot of damage, but the amount of investment into that felt fair to me, and I hope that one day it could come back in some form, but it doesn't seem likely. As for just rockets in general, yeah, I mean, we're Bungie's definitely upping the ante with bosses. It's getting a lot harder. That cost of missing one rocket is getting to be pretty extreme on some of our newer enemies. So I think that's a fair trade-off for what we have here. I'm with you there, Court. I would almost rather they stop working on swords and first work on heavy grenade launchers, because swords at least do have options and pieces of content, but there's not a single piece, there's not a single dungeon, there's not a single strike, there's not a single raid where it's like, you're going to want to put on a heavy grenade launcher right here, because that's where you're going to be able to do a lot of burst DPS, and that's what they're for, like that close to mid-range burst DPS. But yeah, we're all too busy having the time of our lives blasting away with Legend of Acreus and that super close option, or going to town with Lament, which are, again, great options. I don't want those to get necessarily shoved out of the way, but like, can we at least make a spot at the table for the heavy grenade launchers? They've never been relevant since original Last Wish, when that debuted. That was the meta right for Riven, right? Was shooting those into her mouth.
Yeah, and that lasted for a good while in like the year of Forsaken.
Okay,
right. Because I remember like when Galron, and Crown, like grenade launchers were for sure meta for a long time.
Okay,
and because this is also when you still had the auto loading mechanics via your boots and via your Titan barricade, which is absurd. Which I guess makes sense that like they were able to hang on for a little while in that meta, because it's like you just said, they're supposed to be like the burst guy, or like that's where we see them. And honestly, when you look at like current DPS output, if you go look at the damage generator from Rock and Maix, you can see like Wendigo or Regnant or whatever, they're not putting out bad burst damage, but it's just not enough to push them past any of these other Acreus, Hothead, whatever rocket launchers that you have, kind of a thing. So it's like I feel like they're like right on the precipice of having a spot, but we don't have like a requirement. Like there's no encounter that would like put you in the position of thinking, oh, I should definitely use Wendigo right now. And I think that this third encounter of Root of Nightmares definitely was originally in my head was, oh, Wendigo would be great right now. Yeah. But I think that the reality is of like timing out all of your explosive light shots and all this kind of stuff is just not it's just not as practical as just using a clown cartridge rocket launcher or something like that, and just having a rocket launcher that can put off a couple of rockets or 3 rockets consistently and getting dodge reloads and that type of a thing on rocket launchers is still going to surpass that usually for the meta, which is tough to see because I would love those to see come out. The only other one I'm going to throw in here is Leviathan's Breath. Right, this is continued to see buffs over time and kind of like worked its way up into the meta, and it's just such a ridiculous weapon. I think that's why it has that crit requirement that you mentioned. As far as like it feels natural that the highest damage output should require you to be precise. And I think that's something I really like about Leviathan's Breath. And yeah, it's just a kind of obscene weapon. It's just a chain links on a bow, you know. Definitely some fun to use, even though it's outpaced by other weapons in some encounters. It's definitely a viable option up there.
Worst catalyst to complete by far. Holy moly.
Yeah, you were talking about a grind.
If you were not there for Season of the Hunt and you do not have the catalyst completed for Leviathan's Breath, you have my sympathies, because
I hope you get a whole weekend.
You are in for a rough road.
Yeah, they need to change that. Just start it to like 500 kills and there you go.
You can cut it in half, honestly, as far as I'm concerned. It'd be fine. So another thing, kind of talking long-term meta of the game here, let's talk about Artifact, the seasonal Artifact and the Artifact mods for just a second. Bungie said a few seasons ago that they wanted to move away from these just obscenely strong mods that would just totally dominate the meta of every season. Breach and Clear, we're looking at you. Particle Deconstruction, we're looking at you. And I think the question now is, do you guys think that they have done that? Are they still, are they shaping the meta too much via these Artifact mods each season? And do you think that they've hit their sweet spot of not completely dominating mods, but still shaping that meta each season? I don't know. Yeah, where are you guys sitting on this?
Go for it, Court.
We haven't had anything as strong as, say, Breach and Clear, and like those really strong, and I would argue completely out of band Artifact mods. But because they are only here for 3 months every year, sometimes I'm just like, oh, whatever. Everyone can just have some fun with particle deconstruction. But I don't think we've had necessarily as powerful mods or Artifact perks from at least recently anyway. The big highlights for me would obviously be stuff that we got last season, like Bricks from Beyond and like Volatile Flow. Volatile Flow is just always such a great jack of all trades. Just get that on and just see all the void exposures go off. What else did we get? We obviously had the sort of precursor to a lot of the exotic armor reworks with the void weapon channeling, how it was its own kind of stacking thing, where it kind of coincided with the surge mods. Same kind of gimmick here. Obviously, that's kind of been rolled into some of the exotic armors, but in terms, I don't really see anything that's coming to mind that has been as really powerful as something like Breach and Clear. Impetus, you got any kind of thoughts here?
I would say that I think we're still at the same level of strength. It's just no longer on one single mod that shows up in column 5. Yeah. I really do think that the Artifact mod is the best it's ever been from a balance point of view, because we still have the same power fantasies available. It's just requiring more mod slots on the Artifact. So what I just ran actually when we did the exotic mission was I was on Void Titan, and I had the triple void mods from the Artifact all on there. Unto the Breach, Protective Breach, and then Supernova, which are all centered around picking up a Void Breach and then gaining some sort of effect. So I can, when I defeated Void debuff target, I create a Void Breach with Unto the Breach, and then when I pick up a Void Breach, I give an Overshield or refreshes my existing Overshield with Protective Breach. And then with Supernova, if I pick up a Void Breach, my next source of Void damage creates a weakening pulse, right? Those all work together. They provide a lot of great benefits that I can use in moment-to-moment gameplay. There's also some arc ones in this one as well. It's not just limited to Void as well, which is fantastic. I love the different options. If some people feel like this is, too limiting for a season, I have the same response as Court did with, Breach and Clear. You're only going to deal with it with 3 to 3.5 months, right? They're going to pick something else. If you don't like that, then I don't think Destiny's the right game for you. But this seems like a totally fair option from Bungie. And it also, most importantly, for players that are just getting into the whole build crafting, because that has been this year's renewed focus, really. this is a great way to start looking at synergies, right? They have them just right there in the artifact for you to select. You get to see how they work. You get to interact with void overshields and how to create void breaches, and also the weakening effect and debuffs and stuff like that. That is a great primer to just how void subclasses and specifically their 3.0 iteration works. And I love that. So I am completely positive on the artifact. I think they've finally got a spot where, yeah, we don't have one mod that does everything for you and, makes Anarchy just the strongest thing that we've ever had in Destiny 2. They actually have it spread out a little bit more evenly. So now it's your entire ability kit, but your ability kit also influences, right, any source of void damage for Supernova. So that's tying into your weapons now as well. So you can, everything suddenly matters more, and it's a more holistic approach, and I greatly appreciate that. I mean, that's what this game is supposed to be, is that every part matters. Here's how it all ties together. So I think the artifact has done a great job of actually tying everything together, especially for people that are getting into build crafting and want to still hit that same level of power fantasy that we used to have with stuff like particle deconstruction and breach and clear.
Yeah, I think well, go ahead, Court.
I was going to say, so we haven't had maybe as much powerful artifact mods since those days, but we've had a lot more unique ones, and the one that kind of shouts out to me is squad goals. I haven't used it much, but it's on paper looks very like appetizing. Like on finisher, well, affected by a specific subclass buff like Devourer, you grant your allies nearby that subclass specific buff. So if I'm on Void, I've got Devourer, I do a finisher, I give, say, Impetus, who's on Arc, and Saint, who's on Strand, Devourer. And then if you guys do your Arc and your Strand finishers, you give me Amplified, or you give me Woven Mail. So it's very, like, I haven't used it as much as I kind of wanted. Maybe because the other option is, like, the three, kind of the trio Void onto the Breach, Protected Breach, and Supernova are more appetizing, but it's certainly a unique mod, because think of an Arc Titan with Devourer, and Devourer is something that you can just keep up as long as you're killing, as long as you're being aggressive, or a Void Hunter with Woven Mail. It's nuts. Yeah. So it's very unique kind of artifact pair, which I hope we see more of that, plus others as the year kind of progresses.
I was just going to say that I think you nailed it when you were talking about like the ubiquity of the impact of that these mods have, because when it was like, oh, it's the GL mod season, or it's the it's GL season, or it's fusion season, that is like so narrow, versus now it's like, oh, it's Strand season or Arc or Void. And it's so much more open. And even if you think it's one element, now we're talking about it's an element which, is encompassing so many different weapons and things like that in the game, rather than just, it's the fusion rifle season, or it's the grenade launcher season, which I'm not, I think that gets stale. I don't think that stuff like this gets stale, because, we were talking about I mentioned earlier, Run of the Moon, PsyOps GM, right? And, like Strand Titan, Arc Titan, Void Titan. So you got, I think it was Bryce who was in there with he's running all the improved unraveling and Strand's strongest soldier and all this other stuff. And then also running, I'm running conductive cosmic needle, right? Targets affected by Strand take increased damage from Arc and Void. Okay, well now, if our third guy is in there, he's running Arc debuff grenades, vortex grenades, I got pulse grenades, or thunder crashes. You hit some unraveling rounds on a champion, you come in with a thunder crash, you're also rocking thunderous retort, things like that. And the way that you can build into that, even just as a team, and Cord, I think you mentioned squad goals, like these two mods specifically go into, not only should you be building into the artifact mods, you should be building into the way that your team is building into your artifact mods to really capitalize on them. And then, you can do all these crazy devour sharing and extra damage from unraveling, and the way you're crossing your elements and stuff like that. And that's awesome.
I think that's a really great point, because prior to this, you've got three surges to kind of align with. It did feel very uni elemental, like you had to be on a Void or bust, whereas now you're not really at a disadvantage if you're using solar or stasis here, because you can then use your weapons. You can use other weapons that are voids, arc and strand. But yeah, there is still that element. Like, this isn't going to change. I think Bungie they've made it very clear that they're going to have these seasonal kind of vibes, where this season it's void and arc and strand, and next season it'll be something else. But it's not as strict. You can still run your kind of stasis and solar builds if you want to. And yeah, I'm looking at the artifact purchases now, and a lot of these are more kind of like, this is great. If you synergize with your teammates, like if it was the three of us in a GM, I'd be more inclined to be like, what artifacts are you running, Impetus? Like, are you on Arc subclass? Okay, you're running the sort of the trio for Arc. Saint, what are you running? Oh, you're doing Void. Okay, so then I can like bring in a Strand subclass and do what you mentioned that Bryce was doing there. So it's really improved the sort of team orientation compared to prior to Lightfall, and that's just such a great point. I didn't even think of that until you mentioned that, Saint. So that's good to bring up.
All right, we got a couple more sections in here. I think we can kind of merge two of these together. Well, let's start off with the champ sandbox. So, sandbox champion counters system has been around for a while. We've talked about it a little bit. Cord, I'll go right back to you. How are you feeling now that we're like a couple seasons in with the whole champ counter system?
It feels superb. It's genuinely the best quality of life update they've done, perhaps in the entire game, because everyone had problems with champions. I was not necessarily one of them, but I was certainly more kind of on the side of, we need more varied combatants than just shove 10 champions into a room. But I think they've completely fixed that kind of flaw with champions, where they've opened it up to all the subclass, or not all, but most of your subclass abilities. And they still seem to be quite keen to keep adding, as we've seen this season. They added, for Jolt, they had Chaos Reach. They also had Storm Trance when you're sustained fire. You have Point Contact Brace. That's had a nice little glow up since it came out. We had Chromatic Fire for Stasis. For slow, for blind, you had the Fist of Havoc heavy attack. Centrifuge is the new exotic. Raiju's Harness. Chromatic Fire for Arc. Vesper of Radius for Arc. A lot of things. I'm not going to list them all because there's more, and I was not expecting that. I thought what we got in Lightfall would be, right, this is the foundation. We're not really going to add more stuff after this. Other than maybe kind of bolstering the kind of Strand, because, Strand's still like a half-finished subclass until the end of the year, but I've just been loving it. And, making these infographics has really kind of piqued my interest into, I wonder if they're just going to keep expanding on this, because it's definitely room for improvement. A lot of some of the subclasses still require some kind of synergy when it comes to champion stunning, but yeah, it's very interesting that they've went for this, fixing some of the old bugs with stasis freeze, resetting the counter timer, and it's been a trip, to be honest. If you've been playing since Shadowkeep, which is when champions made their debut, back then we had it super restrictive, where you had to apply a champion counter perk to your weapon. It wasn't on your armor, it was to your weapon. So if you had hand cannon, you mentioned anti-barrier hand cannon, that was way back in Season 8, where you had to apply that to your weapon. You'd give up major or minor spec and have anti-barrier hand cannon. And boy, that was rough, I'll tell you that. Ariana's Vow was good back then because it just had intrinsic anti-barrier. But yeah, honestly, just like, I really want to shout out the team for making that happen and just closing out all the little kind of weirdness and bugs, and just fantastic. Impetus.
Got nothing more to add, man. Great update. absolutely took all the pressure off of dealing with champions while still making champions a threat. I think we're at a point now where, if you do wipe to a champion, I think you can fairly say that's on you and your fire team. Whereas beforehand, there just weren't enough options for you to reliably say like, well, you guys should have spec'd better. It's like, no, we just didn't have as many options, and if those options failed you were in deep trouble, right? You had to go kite the boss or the champion around while you were waiting for something. You got to go run over to the other side of the room to go pick up ammo so your weapon you turn around and stun, and then had to deal with that. But yeah, we're now at a spot where there's plenty of options. You can cover the champions reliably, even on one person under your 3-person fire team for GM. You can double up, and you're not taking anything out of your inventory. You just happen to run a different kind of subclass element that also happens to stun the similar kind of champion. I mean, that's just how it should be. It feels great to finally be here. That's all I got to say. How about you, Saint?
Yeah, man. Damn, has this come a long way, right? Court, you mentioned the weapon mods. It's hard to imagine this is like the same game, right? Where this is.
I cleansed that from my memory. I forgot that was a thing until we mentioned it earlier before the episode, and I was just like, "Oh god, that was a thing, and it was horrible."
We're just gonna take that. We're just gonna push that memory way down. Okay. I think that honestly, the only thing I'll say is that I think that the mark of success was whenever there was unstopped champions in an activity, I would just go for my Strand Titan kit, and I wouldn't even think about equipping an unstopped weapon, because it's just so strong and such a consistent, effective counter. Maybe suspend is a little strong. That's just a conversation for another time, though. But I think that is what took me to the point of, man, this is really, it worked. Right, like they opened up the sandbox, and it's so effective that I'm not even. Sometimes I'm not even thinking about bringing specific champ counter weapons, and I could just bring whatever other weapons I want, because I'm so confident that this is a viable, effective strategy for dealing with the champions. All right, I guess second to last kind of major section here. We'll talk about. You guys want to go into the exotic primaries first? And then we'll talk about kind of what
we've
we
already
want to see in the
talked about
future.
what we don't think is viable or not worth using.
Yeah.
I mean, stasis has a lot of. It's not. I don't think we would say it's not worth using, but it has a long way to go before it gets to the worth using point. And definitely primaries, which is what I think we can talk about now. As for things we want to see in the future, so we mentioned sniper rifles already. Ammo economy has got to have some sort of rework. Same thing for stasis, strand. More options for glaives and trace rifles in the kinetic slot for our darkness subclasses for sure. Who put legendary shotguns on there? I'm curious to hear their thoughts on that.
That was me. I just don't like slugs are really good, but I don't feel like pellets are quite doing it for me in PvE usually. I mean, just because of what they've got to they got to compete against those GLs and those fusions, right? So I would like to see a little bit more from legendary shotguns as pellets specifically. But I mean, other than that, that's like my one like special archetype that I really want to see changed. Other than that, I think most of the weapons are in a pretty good spot. Other than like obviously stuff you just mentioned.
Okay, yeah, I'd agree with you on that, I guess. All right,
I will say we've been seeing a lot of stasis and strand weapons coming out, and I really hope that continues. I think that seems to be the vibe anyway. Like, obviously, with it sharing the top slot with kinetic weapons, it can be maybe a little bit crowded, but like there's still room for strand and stasis weapons, and I'm really glad that from the offset that we had strand weapons with our subclass. So I'm looking forward to that, and also hopefully we can get stasis and strand glaives at some point, because I do like using glaives, but because I primarily use a lot of my top slot my middle slot for something else like Cold Heart or Wave Splitter or something else. I think I would use glaives more often if they were in the top slot, but don't know when we'll get that. Maybe. We've been joking about Monte Carlo maybe getting the bayonet treatment.
It won't even matter to you once that happens. Goodness.
It's the first glaive before we actually get a proper glaive. If that's the case, obviously, I'm not sure if that is, but
allegedly,
we'll see. Monte Carlo is good though.
It is.
Good all rifle.
It's because it's an exotic primary, which is what
Yeah.
something I've been thinking about ever since ever since we found out that Graviton Lance is getting juiced to high heavens. It feels strange to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this thing, Court. But I feel like when I look at the legendary and exotic dichotomy when it comes to specials and heavies, it's a pretty evenly matched field, despite the variety. All right. Sure, there's some really strong exotics out there, but we also just talked about Forbearance, Riptide. I mean, those are basically exotic tier legendary special weapons.
Yeah.
And amongst the heavies, right, a lot of us are using exotics and legendaries together in conjunction, right? You've got a synergy like Galahorn buffing legendary rocket launchers. You've got people using Thunderlord, which is in conjunction with a special weapon, typically like Divinity for extra damage there, but also just as an add clear and damage option. Tractor Cannon alongside other close range heavy weapons as well. I When I look at primaries, though, and I look at legendary primaries, and I look at exotic primaries, and I look at the recent number of buffs that exotic primaries are getting, it feels like they're headed in opposite directions, and that is giving me a little bit of concern if double special is eventually addressed, and we have more of an incentive to run a primary and a special and a heavy. I don't think we're going to be using legendary primaries. I mean, the exotic options are becoming almost too good to be true, you know. With the release of the Witch Queen expansion, the exotic primaries and all trace rifles receive that 40% damage buff against minor enemies, what people call red bars commonly. And then on top of that, several exotic primaries have received additional buffs since then in the form of either a catalyst, just flat up extra perks, or a global damage buff like Graviton Lance is going to be getting. So when I look at like the best exotic primaries for PvE, I drew up a quick list kind of just off the top of my head here. If you guys want to add any to them, feel free to shout them out. But between Osteostriga, Huckleberry, Lemonarch, Trinity Ghoul, Tiku's Divination, Wishender, Verglaw Curve, Quicksilver Storm, Centrifuge, Skyburner's Oath, Vex Mythoclast, Collective Obligation, Graviton Lance, Outbreak Perfected, Sunshot. I mean, what hope do our legendary primaries have against these kinds of weapons, right? What can they possibly do other than, you know, bring down the exotic primaries to let some of our legendaries, the stuff that we craft, the stuff that we're chasing in dungeons and raids to get good drops of. I don't know what we can do about it, because it feels to me like the gap is so wide between these two camps of weapons. And it's been nice getting to run with a lot of these older exotic primaries, often for the first time, since there wasn't much of a reason prior to these changes. But it's coming at the cost of the weapons that I'm paying for in seasons that I'm supposed to be actively chasing, you know, in the 3 months of a given season. So I look at something like, you know, Targeted Redaction, a Void Hand Cannon, and then I look at Graviton Lance, a Void Pulse Rifle, and I think, yeah, no, I'm using the thing that can just blow up an entire room with a cool supernova, or, you know, to keep on theme of Void here, Collective Obligation has way more Void 3.0 synergy than Targeted Reaction could ever hope for, or any Void Pulse Rifle, right, if we want to be a bit more direct, right? I mean, the exotics are in a great spot, but I think they're in too great of a spot, to be perfectly honest. And I'm of the opinion that 40% damage buff probably needs to get brought down, or legendary primaries just need to get a flat buff to start bringing them a little bit closer to, because the gap in my mind is getting to a point where once the double special nerf does take effect, I think we're going to still be running into issues where people don't want to play the game because there's not something to chase, which has been such a huge criticism that I've been hearing recently, is that the weapons just don't feel as chase worthy. But what do you guys think about this? Do you think that legendary primaries and the gap between them and exotic is not as great to you? Do you feel like you guys both use double special, so I know this is a bit of a challenging conversation because you probably haven't been using as many primaries as recently, but what would it take for you to get back into using primaries once a hypothetical double special nerf takes effect?
I'll start off by saying that I think one of the things that keeps me from feeling like this is hugely dominating is how many good heavy slot and special exotic weapons there are. Because it's like kind of forces my hand a little bit, because it's like, oh, well, you don't use Tractor Cannon. that's great. Or like you want to use a Thunderlord, Leviathan's Breath, whatever, Lament, whatever have you. It's like a benefit that you're having to act, or like you're actively losing out on, right? And it definitely makes me think about it. 40% does seem crazy, and it definitely does make some weapons feel like the only good weapon in their archetype. And I think that was definitely the case before we got all the primary buffs, and because all the exotics have been included in that, it maybe has started to exacerbate that, because we've gotten primary weapons buffed up a little bit. Now all the exotics kept the same buffs. Now instead of maybe being the only viable option in their category, they're just shredding. And I think that things like conditional finality, Wither Horde, Arbalest, whatever else have you, is like kind of pushing against this a little bit, because they offer just insane amounts of buffs. Cold Heart is also obscenely strong, and those are like pushing back against that a little bit. I definitely get the idea that a 40% difference is kind of insane. I don't know if I would want to see that changed much. Maybe 10% down. But to your point, I half the time I'm not running a primary, so it is not. It's not super. I maybe don't have the best perspective on this. Cord, how you feeling about this?
So I think the 40% is a little bit too high for some of the weapons. So I like. Do you need 40% on Osteostriga? No, because its whole gimmick is. It's the ad clear submachine gun. Like it doesn't need that 40%. Does Huckleberry need it? I think it does though. Like I think Huckleberry could be pretty down in the dumps if it didn't have maybe not 40% but like 25 or 30%, just to kind of keep it up at the level, because it doesn't have that same vibe as Osteostriga does. Thinking like something like Vex Mythoclast, I don't think needs the 40% either, because it's a unique own thing with it being like an auto rifle, fusion rifle, but it gets Rampage on top of it. It also has its own, like you can mold it into a linear fusion rifle for 3 shots. Like that doesn't need 40%. Sunshot, we're not sure how that'll kind of position itself, say next season, with hand cannons getting kind of a blanket buff across the spectrum, but like I'm thinking, does that really need 40%? Maybe 20%, 15%. So yeah, while I do agree that I think 40% across all exotic primaries is too much, because you're buffing something like Osteostriga with something like Huckleberry, one of them doesn't need it. But I'm thinking more like from a development point of view, is like how much work that would kind of produce to, rather than blanket buff all these exotic primaries, you go in and fine-tune them just to kind of really level it, and that would be the ideal scenario for me. But I completely understand why, like, someone like Chris Proctor's probably like, that's just going to produce too much work for us to do with all, like, I'm looking at the list of exotic primaries, and there's just so many that we haven't listed in this episode, but that could either benefit with the 40% or could not, or could be somewhere in the middle. It's just a lot of work here. The question with like legendary primaries, I'm not sure what they could do. Again, it kind of ties into what I would prefer them to do with exotics, of tweaking them individually and then see how they are. But like, Impetus, would you prefer legendary primaries to be on the level of, say, Fatebringer? Or are we talking like slightly below Fatebringer? Just as like a blanket buff, let's hypothetically suggest that.
Buff to what specifically? Its damage profile, its stat package, the perk pools. What do you mean specifically?
I suppose the perk pools, but let's go with perk pools.
Yeah,
I think that's the easiest thing to open up, right?
Yeah. There's it is surprising to me, and it's just Graviton Lance really, but the fact that they stuck Vorpal Weapon and Turnabout on there. I mean, when you think about, like, on paper, the sheer amount of perks that gun now has, plus the damage buff that it's getting. that's a lot. Like, that is a ridiculous amount of things for one weapon to have. Then you've got also on top of that kind of the stat modifiers that maybe don't quite show up as a perk itself. You call it the hidden hand effect on its aim assist, right? Whether or not we want to classify that as like its own perk or just the fact that it has a really high aim assist stat. You know, they seem to be throwing perks onto some of these underused exotic primaries, and I'm okay with like them wanting to make some of the underused stuff a little bit more viable. But at a certain point, if you keep slapping on perks to these weapons, they're just going to get so far out ahead of legendaries, the ones where we're now in a crafting meta where the choice of what you put on your weapon matters more. It does not. It causes me concern. I would want perk pools for legendary primaries to become a little bit stronger than even on the seasonal tier level, on the world loot tier level. I mean, on the one hand, this is why I'm such a huge advocate for crafting. It's like, I need to have a perfect legendary primary. If you want me to justify, if I had the option to run an exotic primary, my legendaries need to be the best possible version for me to really consider even bringing them in over something that has a total of 5 legendary tier perks all slapped into one frame.
Yeah. This conversation also reminds me of the joke from a long time ago where it's like, week 4 of Destiny 1 and Xur brings Gallahorn and everybody's like, dude, who would even waste their exotic slot on a heavy, right? Like, that's ridiculous. And that, I think, again, that is like the one thing of like the limitation of the exotic slot. It's like it's like, yes, I'm getting a 40% buff, which is obscene in some categories, but I am like effectively having to give up my like exotic, usage on a primary weapon, which doesn't have like the siege damage output as some others. And I think that to the other point of the conversation about traits is, I think that stacking up traits like frenzy and explosive payload, or stacking up traits like forbearance, right, for example, of like soul drinker plus whatever, there's ambitious assassin and like unrelenting and chain reaction on this thing, right? You get these traits stacked up, and that is what's going to beat out my choice of an exotic. Obviously these are special weapons or in that case, but I think that letting the traits go even crazier is what is going to keep that like competition going between, the exotic is really good, it gives you these buffs, but it's going to cost you that slot, and like, oh man, look at these other trait options that maybe you could have if you're going to go down the legendary route. And I couldn't agree with you more on the crafting front of the ability to craft the legendary primaries is huge, because I ran a lot of Master Templars, and I'm still don't have the perfect Fatebringer. I mean, I love the thing, but it's not a perfect time loss Fatebringer.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird spot. It's not like a huge concern right now because double special is still so dominant for top tier performance. But I'm worried, man. And they're putting out great exotic primaries, but I don't see the great legendary primaries outside of like specific raids or dungeons options, right?
Well, that's the reason why I like mentioned Fatebringer, because that's the one that people think of when this is almost like a pseudo exotic.
Yeah.
Because it's got such a unique perk package, and the stats are really kind of hyped up. But that's a raid weapon. We then start entering the whole kind of like, well, these activities require these type of weapons because they're end game, so they need to be relatively kind of juiced up, and it rolls into a different topic, which I know we don't have time to kind of go down that particular rabbit hole. But I absolutely agree, Imtis, where there will come a point where it's like these legendary primaries are just, they're not it. The perks aren't it. The damage isn't it. And again, just going back to my suggestion of maybe not something that they could really do anytime soon, but just kind of start individually tweaking the exotics and even maybe legendaries as well. Kind of do a nice little kind of evening out, because like I've got my demo open up here, and I'm thinking like collective obligation its whole gimmick isn't necessarily damage. Its mini game is the Void 3.0 synergy. That's the whole point of that weapon. It doesn't necessarily need a 40% damage buff. As much as I love having that, but it's a weapon that doesn't need it. Whereas something like
I think Tiku's would feel kind of bad without that.
Yeah. Something like, let's see here. I'm thinking in a PvE environment, like Suro's Regime, we don't talk about Suro's Regime a lot, but like that not having a 40% damage buff to miners would be catastrophic. But then again, looking at some of the legendary weapons here, and it's just like, well, Rufus's Fury, yeah, it's a raid weapon, but I kind of feel like it does need that slight edge compared to where it is currently right now. But
especially with the trace rifles, like does Wave Splitter need an extra 40% against miners? Man, I don't know about that, dude.
Yeah, right. I mean, we just went through all the options that Wicked Implement has access to, and then I look at the other stasis scout rifles I have. It's like, well, I've got Headstone, so I can still make shards. It's just an extra 3 steps though to get those shards. Whereas Wicked Implement's like, yeah, I'm just gonna start mowing things down, dude. 3 shots and they're frozen. Don't even worry about it, dude. Yeah. I'll make shards out you butt, and you're like, okay, well, this is definitely a different experience. So. Yeah, those are my concerns. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe I'm being crazy. We'll find out in a few months. Then after Salt personally goes to Bungie and brings up my concerns, and it gets changed, we'll be like, thank you.
I think I definitely think that your mind is in a good anticipation of a potential future sandbox and a meta that we end up in. No doubt about that.
Yeah, it's just a question of when we get there, right?
Well, yeah,
if we get there. Yeah.
So, Emphasis, you've got a little kind of, just to kind of round things off for the episode. I know we've been going on for a long time. It's one of our longer episodes.
That's what happens when I show up, boys.
Well, I think to be honest, a lot of these have been very interesting conversation topics, and like, I completely, like, all 3 of us haven't been playing the game a lot, but like, we're still talking about the game a lot.
Yes.
And, it's still. Like, we still enjoy playing this game, but like, we are concerned about XYZ, and that's fair enough. But yeah, you've got a little comment here kind of talking about so what damage buffs get legendary primaries to the starting damage profile of an exotic primary. We've got a few perks here, like Surrounded, which is a 40% damage buff. Golden Tricorn ×2 is 50%. Got Target Lock at 40%. Multi-kill clip at 50. Redirection 100. Blunt execution rounds 500. Rampage ×2 plus kill clip is 66%. Disruption break, all that jazz. So what was your vibes when you were kind of referring to these perks? Or you want these legendary primaries to be kind of uplifted to these kind of levels?
I was simply using this as a demonstration of the gap between the worst exotic primary, your Suros Regime, and then the best legendary primary. What does that legendary primary need to do just to get to the starting damage profile of Suros Regime? And they gotta have, these were all the options that I was looking at on the perks available for legendary primaries, not taking into account your surges, your overcharges, all that stuff, like just weapon to weapon. What does it take for you to get to where Suros Regime starts at? And these are the options available, and they're very specific. They do not show up on a ton of perks, and if they do show up on a ton of weapons, they take a lot of effort to get to that high threshold, that 40%. It's rough, man. It is rough.
All right. Any closing comments on the meta here?
I'm done.
Now, like I said, very interesting topics. Be interesting to hear what folks listening have got to say. I think we've said a few controversial things, like double special and
get it out of here.
Forbearance and Riptide getting knocked down, but I think that's what is required to make sure the game doesn't completely implode into itself because of power creep,
or just get stale. Honestly, which is like the other half of that. But that is all we have for episode 70. We hope that you have enjoyed our deep dive into the meta of the game. If you think that we are underestimating your favorite DPS option, or maybe we're giving way too much credit to a class, or stasis is better than we think, you can always join in the convo. Jump into the Massive Breakdowns Discord server. We've got all kinds of channels where you can discuss different weapon roles, the show, anything like that. Hit us up on Twitter. We are all very happy to talk about the game, its meta, and all of that stuff. Thank you for listening. And as always, we want to thank our audio engineer, Autodidactos, for helping us sound our best every week. Until next time, my name is Saint Kabir. You can find me by Saint_Kabir on Twitter, Discord, and in the game. Court, where can the folks find you?
Yep, my name is Court. You can find me over on the various social media platforms, such as Twitter and Blue Sky, as Court Projects. I'm also Court Projects on Discord. You can find my spreadsheet and infographics over on the Massive Breakdowns website, alongside many other great applications and science apps, spreadsheets, all that great stuff to enhance your Destiny experience. Impetus, where can we find you?
My name is Impetus. You can find me by that name in Destiny and in Discord, and as Impetus always on Twitter. Thank you so much for listening. We're not quite sure what we'll cover next week, but maybe it'll just be responding to the fallout of this episode. Who knows? But until that time, have a great time in Destiny. We'll catch you later.